Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee meeting. We will start with roll call.
Lee,
Present.
Zabula,
Present.
Lira, Johnson,
Present.
Hayes, Eagle, Hesse,
Present.
Wenzelberger, Yang, Hischler,
Present.
Benayeg.
Present.
All right. Next, we'll move on to our land acknowledgement, read by Alex. Thank you, Alex.
We are gathered here on the lands that were originally home to the Menominee and Ho-Chunk nations. We honor the Menominee and Ho-Chunk communities and are grateful for their stewardship of the land and waters. We acknowledge these ancestral grounds as sacred and remember the complex history of settler colonialism on these lands and the effects that persist today. We commit to a restorative and healing relationship of the original inhabitants and our community.
Thank you, Alex. Next, we'll read the mission statement, read by Juliana.
The mission of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee is to create a more welcoming, connected, and equitable Oshkosh by consciously including the richness and complexities of marginalized voices in its planning and function.
Thank you, Juliana. All right. Next, we need to approve the minutes from our March 27th meeting. Okay. We need a motion to
I move to approve them.
second.
Second.
All right. Adrian?
Any discussion?
Oh, any discussion? Thank you.
Barring none.
All right. Yay, yay. Aye, sorry.
Zabula,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Hesse,
Aye.
Hischler,
Aye.
Benayeg.
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. All right. We have one person here registered to provide citizen statement. I'd like to invite Heidi Keating to the table. For a little bit of background, Heidi was at our previous meeting in March to give us an update on our community health assessment, and she has a little follow-up for us.
Yeah, thank you for taking my public comment. So I was here last month and went over the community health assessment. It's a requirement for local health departments, and really the better and bigger idea is that we have a chance to learn about our community and look at a lot of different information and data and that kind of thing to determine our community health priorities. And so I talked briefly about the focus groups, and I didn't give very much detail because we were still trying to figure out the process. So I just wanted to stop today and share the process with you. I have it kind of mapped out. And so one is just for you to have this and to kind of, follow through from last time. Second is if this group is interested in doing a focus group as a diversity committee, that I could work with Angie maybe and we could schedule a time. So just something to think about. And third, if there's anybody in this group that is interested in hosting a focus group, to just, you can contact me. You can follow these steps here. Another contact at the health department is listed, and you could contact her as well. So I just wanted to pass these out.
Thank you, Heidi.
Would anybody like my contact?
Me as well.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Heidi.
Thank you, Heidi.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Heidi. Thank you. Okay. All right. Do we have anyone registered for public comment?
We do not.
Okay. And moving on. Next, we have here with us Sarah Phillips from the Oshkosh Public Museum. She's going to give us a little overview on the process. Hi. Kate?
Anna.
Anna, I'm sorry. And Anna as
Well,
well.
we can have them both introduce themselves formally as well
Okay.
and what their roles are.
Sounds good.
Oh,
All right, take it away.
Sure. I'm Sarah Phillips. I'm the director of the Oshkosh Public Museum. And Anna?
My name's, thank you. My name's Anna Canizzo. I'm the Assistant Director and Chief Curator at the Oshkosh Public Museum.
So we're here today just to talk a little bit about the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act. I'll be giving kind of a general overview of the museum's philosophy as it pertains to this law, and then Anna can go into more detail about the museum processes and how we have been working within the constraints of the law, but also trying to work above and beyond what the law outlines for museums to do. And if folks have questions, feel free to jump in. We didn't create a presentation because my hope was that this would kind of be a conversation and a dialogue. So the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, or NAGPRA, as you'll hear many times today, is a federal law that was passed in 1990. This set of laws mandates institutions to repatriate or return Native American ancestral remains, sacred, burial, or other culturally significant items to direct descendants and federally recognized tribes. NAGPRA provides a legal framework and a pathway for these processes to take place. The Oshkosh Public Museum is fully committed to the ethical and legal principles of NAGPRA and considers this law to be foundational of appropriate museum practices in a modern world. Since this law's inception, we've been working in consultation with Native partners to identify and respectfully return cultural items. I want to be very transparent. We currently care for cultural items and ancestral remains. The majority of these were collected through archaeological excavations over 50 years ago. Over the years, we have met with several tribal partners within formal NAGPRA consultation to repatriate. We've also ensured that exhibits like People of the Waters are crafted in dialogue and in collaboration with tribal partners to ensure their voices and perspectives are included in the museum narratives. We recognize the need for transparency and to be a responsible, responsive institution. Repatriation is an important pathway for the museum to acknowledge past injustices and take corrective action. Through this process, we hope to continue improving and expanding our relationship and collaborations with Native communities and are invested in a shared goal of success. I do like to say, though, that we are a museum in progress. As part of the repatriation process since 1990, visitors have found that there are some items that have been removed from display. This is because these items are sensitive and deserve to be respected as such. We want to make sure that the stories that we tell examine who is included in the dialogue and also who was excluded from past narratives to make sure that we don't continue to make the same mistakes. We welcome the opportunity to highlight the repatriation process as we move forward, and we're constantly examining our museum practices to ensure that we're bettering for the future. We've already identified some ways that we can immediately improve, such as creating more transparent language on our website so different tribal liaisons and interested individuals can learn about holdings and how to have their questions answered immediately. Sending notice annually to different tribal liaisons and officials within tribal governments, and seeking to fund a position through board-governed funds for a position dedicated to updating our records and researching these important holdings. So, and with that, I'll hand it over to Anna for more details. So.
Thank you, Sarah. Any questions or anything real quick before I could,
This might be what you're covering, but I'm interested to know what sorts of things and how many, compared to your entire holdings.
sure. Well, I'll start, I definitely will circle back to that. I'll just not everybody's familiar with NAGPRA. I mean, it's a complicated law. And so I just wanted to start with kind of outlining things that would be like frequently asked questions. Sarah outlined what NAGPRA is, but what does it require? NAGPRA requires museums, agencies, and universities to compile detailed summaries and inventories, consult with Native American tribes, and follow a process to return human remains, funerary objects, sacred objects, and objects of cultural patrimony that meet the requirements outlined in the law and are claimed by a tribe or tribes, plural. So what is the scope of items covered under NAGPRA? I mean, you can imagine, well, what does that mean? NAGPRA covers 5 different categories: human remains, associated and unassociated funerary objects, sacred objects, and objects of cultural patrimony. Human remains fall into 2 groups: those that can be culturally affiliated or connected to a modern-day tribe or tribes, and 2, those that cannot are considered culturally unidentifiable. So just to kind of drill down on that just a little bit more, funerary objects are items that are reasonably believed to have been placed with individual human remains either at the time of death or later as part of the death rite or ceremony of a culture. In the event the museum holds both the human remains and funerary objects, the funerary objects are considered associated. In the event the human remains are not in possession of the museum, objects are considered unassociated. Sacred objects. Sacred objects are specific ceremonial objects which are needed by traditional Native American religious leaders for the practice of traditional Native American religions by their present-day adherents. An object of cultural patrimony. This is more of a gray area, and this is a very fluid topic. An item that is not considered cultural patrimony 20 years ago could be considered cultural patrimony today. So it's a very, it has evolutions, it can change. So an object of cultural patrimony is an object having ongoing historical, traditional, or cultural importance central to the Native American group, rather than property owned by an individual Native American, and which therefore cannot be alienated, appropriated, or conveyed by any individual. And like I said, it's a very fluid thing. It's one of those gray areas that's not necessarily as cut and dry. And our most recent repatriation with the museum was under that designation. So to get into that a little bit more, one of the things to sort of tease out too is what is the difference between culturally affiliated and culturally unidentifiable? So cultural affiliation means a relationship of a shared group identity which can be reasonably traced historically or prehistorically between a present-day Indian tribe or Native Hawaiian organization and an identifiable earlier group. NAGPRA requires this determination be made in consultation and consider multiple lines of evidence, including geographical, kinship, biological, archaeological, linguistic, folkloric, oral tradition, historical, or other information. Those are just a few. Remains are culturally unidentifiable when a relationship of a shared group identified cannot be established on a reasonable basis. Culturally unidentifiable remains are eligible to still be claimed, however, and transferred to Native American tribes using a specific regulation within the NAGPRA law. So that was the nitty-gritty of it. If everybody was taking notes and having their highlighter, those are just some of the frequently asked questions about what NAGPRA means to everybody. So what is the NAGPRA submission process? It starts with a submission of a claim or request by a tribal entity or descendant, then usually a consultation follows that, a review of evidence for claims of kinship or cultural affiliation, and then drafting and submitting a notice for publication, or it's also called a letter of intent to repatriate to the NAGPRA, like federal office. So after that approved notice has gone through that committee and just making sure everything's on the sort of, all the details are there. It's then published to the Federal Register, and then there's a waiting period in case other claimants come forward. And if none do, usually it's a period of about 30 days. Then there's a transfer of control, and then a transfer of physical possession. So that's just the process. So it definitely is a process for both the museum organization or other organization, as well as the tribal organization. So there's definitely a lot of communication that needs to happen during that time. So a brief timeline of events for the museum and NAGPRA activities. So I'm just going to, it's a very brief timeline just to kind of see so you understand where we sort of have progressed with this law. So in 1990, the NAGPRA law was adopted by Congress. After 1990, I don't have an exact date, but the museum hired a temporary staff member to help begin those inventory processes. So the museum completed its inventory of human remains and associated funerary objects in 1993. So within 3 years of the law being passed, the museum had completed those inventories and sent it to 10 tribes. In 1994, there was a brief disruption because the museum had a fire, so that just stalled things a little bit. But as early as 1995, we have communications that we engage with the Great Lakes Intertribal Repatriation Committee about unidentifiable remains. In 1995, we had a consultation by the Menominee Nation to review all Menominee remains and items, so funerary items, sacred items. And then in 2000 and 2001 was a repatriation of human remains as well as funerary objects. I'll say Menominee ancestors from the OPM. From 2005 to 2008, the museum works with the federal NAGPRA office to publish inventories in the database related to human remains and funerary objects that have not completed the NAGPRA process. So that's where it's published in the federal online database. So that's publicly accessible. And then skipping forward, we had our most recent repatriation process happen start to finish in 2020, which was great because that was a pandemic year. So we were able to move through that really quickly and successfully. So, and that was under the designation of cultural patrimony. Any questions thus far?
It's a very big topic.
Yeah, I'm getting to
But that very last one, what were the objects?
It was just one object. It was a powder horn with the Stockbridge Munsee Mohican Nation, and their reservation is like right next to the Menominee Reservation in Kashina. And we had a powder horn that belonged to an important sachem, and so they submitted a recommendation to repatriate. It started with a loan for an exhibit for their powwow, and then when they returned the loan, they expressed their intention to repatriate that particular powder horn. And so we went through the process as quickly, and we're really focused on making this a successful repatriation. So, and that's been widely published too. You can read about that because it happened fairly recently. We took part in the sort of return home ceremony. There was, even though it was pandemic, we were able to, typically there's a lot of celebration, but it was more of an intimate, but we did broadcast it. We also worked with the Stockbridge Munsee to do prior to the ceremony, a educational background presentation that was available online to hear about the history of this object, about NAGPRA, from both the museum as well as their repatriation officer, Bonnie Hartley. So we tried to make it more educational as well. So really enhancing that process and connecting with that community. All right. I do want to close with that part saying that we receive requests regularly, especially in the past like 5 years. We receive at least a couple of requests, and that could be just asking for an inventory from, a particular tribe might just ask us for an inventory of objects, to being contacted by the federal government, just making sure details are correct in their database. So we regularly receive requests related to NAGPRA at the museum. So it's not something that we're not used to. So I wanted to talk a little bit about our inventory, what we have actually that we're stewarding at this time. This is specific to human remains and associated funerary objects. So the federal database lists them as MNI, so minimum number of individuals, and AFO, so associated funerary objects. So since the museum's establishment in 1924, the museum has stewarded 58 minimum number of individuals.
Can you define what that means real quick?
Yeah, so it's not always complete skeletal remains. It's sometimes it could be several fragments. On a couple of occasions we've had full skeletons, but it means that the remains can be traced to one individual and represents one individual. So does that make sense? Did I make that clear? Okay. So the total individuals and objects, funerary objects that have been repatriated since that time are 6 individuals and 62 associated funerary objects. So the total individuals and funerary objects culturally unaffiliated and unclaimed at this time are 52 individuals, or MNI, and 135 associated funerary objects. But I wanted to add kind of a notation to that, that the majority of these culturally unaffiliated, unclaimed remains are associated with provenience information, like sites, locations, have potential affiliations with respect to time periods designated by archaeologists. These haven't been designated by source communities, but by archaeologists. So an example of that would be Oneota, which we hear quite often, and that is a prehistoric culture, native culture group that was known to inhabit an area pre-contact. So we do have information like that associated with with the majority of these unaffiliated, unclaimed remains and objects. So that can help aid future repatriations as evidence becomes more or it becomes uncovered to help with making these successful. And I know there's been examples of this recently. So I think that at the time that wasn't useful information, but now it's become more useful. So of the 52 individuals, 10 have no provenience information. The others do, so 42 individuals do. And of the 135 funerary objects, only 4 have no provenience information. So it's not just kind of a shrug of the shoulders. We do have some information that could help with future repatriation claims. So as of April 4th, 2023, only 10% of the individuals stewarded by the museum have been claimed, and 31% of the funerary objects have been claimed. And to give you, I think you asked about compared to our entire collection of cultural heritage that we steward, we have over 250,000 objects in the collection. So it's a very big collection. Yeah. that's my presentation. I'd love to take some of your questions.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Anna. Can open it up to questions, comments.
Can I go first? Thank you so much for both of you coming here this evening to share with us. I've been sitting here just listening quietly here, and to me, I can trace back to the land acknowledgement which we just read just now, where we acknowledge the ancestral grounds as sacred and remember the complex history of settler colonialism and on these lands and the effects that persist today. I think this speaks to exactly to what we are talking about here. So painful to my heart right now as I'm talking, because I feel, for a start, there's the disregard of traditional oral history of the native people that inhabited some of these lands. Some of these remains we're talking about, they are very important to those communities. So the disregard of the history from the natives, I think, has gone in for a long time. And now we find a situation whereby we are struggling even finding the information where to take these remains, because we never wanted to know about the history about this thing. That's number one. The second thing that comes to my heart a lot right now as I'm thinking about this is just 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, I was in this building, and there was a conversation, and I paid attention to the three groups of people who were here. We heard from the business side, and we heard from the government side, and then we heard from the community. And as I paid attention to those meetings, it was over the land issue in Oshkosh here, where construction is to take place. And I think, to me, what I noticed as I was listening to those conversations, it was more on the profit side. None of the individuals that were in this building spoke about what potential could be found as they start digging through the ground. So it brings me to another point where, okay, everybody seems to just be invested in their own current economic profits, I think the only person who touched a little bit on that conversation on this kind of issues maybe was Ashley. It's painful to this, because for me, as I've lived in this town in Oshkosh, and I'm thinking about it, there's so many cemeteries around. We can call them ancestral cemeteries around here, which I feel like if one person decided today and dig around there, and then we say we're going to call some archaeologists from Madison to come in and help us identify what we found. Oh man, so disrespectful. So that's a comment I wanted to pass, but thank you so much for your commitment, for the museum's commitment, but I feel like other entities around are not doing as much as you guys are doing. Even just pulling out these remains from these lands and take them to the reservation, that's a different location. You know what I'm saying? That's kind of like if somebody came in and said, hey, we're going to dig your grandpa out of this ground and take it to somewhere in Iowa, the pain, the pain from those communities continues today. I just don't know. It just blows my mind. I just want to say that. Yeah.
Thank you. I think it's important to recognize that sort of trauma that has occurred historically. When we were developing People the Waters, one of the things that we wanted to highlight, we highlight archaeology as part of the interpretation, but we also acknowledge that archaeology, while it has yielded some help or scientific advancements, it is destructive. It has had damaging results on these communities, and it does not enjoy an entirely positive history. So that is something we acknowledge within that exhibition. So it's not just glorifying this destructive process. By science, it's a destructive process, but it's also been traumatizing to these communities as well. So I think that's important work that we plan on continuing to do, is not just, ignoring the trauma that's also happened, as part of that interpretation. And that's definitely something we're committed to doing.
Anyone else with questions for Sarah and Anna? We so appreciate them coming in today. I realize I don't have a mic right now.
Oh,
No, that's okay. I didn't want to
I
take
took yours. I'm
No, I didn't
sorry.
want to take it back away from you guys, but no, we really appreciate you coming in and sharing with us. I mean, part of our charge as the DEI committee is to help educate the public, and I think hearing what you do at the museum is a great opportunity, to share information with our citizens. So thank you so much.
So what would you like this group, in terms of support, what would you like us to do to help you do this work you do?
Ask that to the boss.
Right.
No, I think one of the most important things that, from the museum standpoint, that we can share, at least, speaking for the Oshkosh Public Museum, is that we truly want to have these ongoing conversations with the right people who can make things happen. So from our standpoint, we are invested in caring for these individuals and for these items until they're returned home properly. But in order to do that, we have to continue a dialogue with the appropriate people. So if you know of someone who has questions, send them our way. If you know of somebody who feels strongly about this, send them our way, because without having that information out there, shared in multiple ways, it can be on a website, it could be said during a meeting, but unless there's that ongoing conversation, then people are not always going to know exactly who to talk to, where to go, what the process is. And we can help kind of steward that and answer questions they have and provide as much clarity to things as we possibly can to do this successfully moving forward. So.
Yeah, excuse me, that brings me to a question. I believe you had mentioned a staff person that you were soon to be funding or hiring, or is that something new, short-term, to really work with this process? I believe you are.
What I'm hoping, I mentioned this to my board president in the past couple meetings actually, is the Public Museum Board has funds that they govern, which are separate than the city tax levy funds.
Okay.
And we, of course, this would have to go through the board, but we do have a vested interest in continuing the research of this portion of our collection in particular, and I think it's overdue for updating those records and learning more. And in order to do that, I think we have the funds, if the board approves it, to hire someone at least on a annual basis, or I don't know what that looks like, but to do some of that work and to start creating more of that conversation officially between the museum and the appropriate officials, because like Anna said, things have changed, we've learned more, technologies have changed, and so until we can really put that in an updated version of our holdings, then it's just that much harder to have those conversations. And so I think if we're able to hire a staff person, that would be a huge leap for us. And knowing that it's something that is important to the board as well, I think it feels positive to me. So.
Well, thank you for the distinction between the board funds and the tax levy dollars, and that you're trying to fund this through the board. Is that similar to other positions at the museum?
We do have positions that are funded partially through board governed funds.
Partially, but
Yeah.
its entirety. I'm just wondering,
We, without getting into individual numbers, we do have at least one staff person who is funded fully through board governed funds, and one that is going to be joining us next week. We have a new curator of education coming on, and he'll be funded, split between the city and board governed funds.
Thank you. I
Thank you. Yeah.
Can I just add a little, I just want to add just a little.
Please.
That, sorry. Something we had talked about with that position too is a lot of our documents are still analog. I mean, it was early 1990s, so we have paper documents. And so to hire someone who's knowledgeable about how to digitize that very sensitive information in an appropriate way, one of the roadblocks, or it was a choice. It was a choice by our previous staff member who controlled the documents and everything, was because this information was sensitive, do we put it on our database so we can access? So having someone and looking at someone who is knowledgeable about how to make that information easier to access for the repatriation process, but still be sensitive to that type of information is also incredibly important too. So it's a little nuanced thing, but it's more than just paper documents. These are really sensitive topics. These are sensitive items. These are things we recognize that, you know, we have to be very careful and thoughtful as we move forward with that type of information.
I have a question. I wonder if anyone from the Oshkosh Public Museum serves as like a consult to like city council or to administration here, like for the city of Oshkosh, as they make decisions on, let's say, like development, like, because like, is that something that like, you're talking about the importance of sacred objects, and, you know, I think many people on our committee understand that, but that might not be the general narrative or understanding. So I wonder if there's anyone from OPM that sits on any advisory councils or advises in any way to council or to, you know, city officials, staff.
I think when questions arise, we are happy to help out, but if you're kind of looking at the commercial development side of things or community development, that would typically go through Kelly Nyforth and her staff, and I have to plead ignorance on what their process is. I know that all of the different departments have to follow particular laws as it pertains to the state laws and then also the federal laws that apply to them when you're looking at a particular site. And so with the museum acting as a repository for those things and not being part of the actual process of development, I think it circumvents us in a procedural way just because we don't take part in that aspect of it, if that answers your question.
Yeah, and because, you know, the council did vote to approve that development, and that's, you know, just one project, but I just wonder, had our committee brought this up prior, you know, with that as an advisory group, you know, would that have impacted the conversation in any way? And so I think sometimes we need to elevate these issues and topics in these public forums or public settings, because I don't know who else would talk about it then, right? And so I'm just wondering if OPM had that advisory role in any way as well. So.
That's why I was thinking about it in a way, like before that development takes place anywhere in these lands.
Mm-hmm.
We may not want to go too off topic from what we posted on our agenda. I think you're referring to some other procedures that occurred. So today we were trying to stick with what our museum does to help repatriate. So, all right.
Other questions? If anyone does have questions, please feel free to reach out. All of us, I think, are pretty easy to find. Angie, I just gave you my card, but anyone who wants to contact us with more questions or comments on anything, please feel free, and we're happy to talk more. So.
Thank you so
much
much.
for being here.
Thank you. I have one as well. Sure. Yeah.
I'll grab mine real quick.
Thank you.
Oh, perfect.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Anna. Appreciate it.
There you go.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
Get one.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
These are Anna's cards if anyone wanted.
Oh, thank you, Anna.
Sign one of those too.
Okay. The next item on our agenda is to discuss the community event, the Dragon Boat Festival funding. So at our last, just to give you a little update, I did present to council a couple weeks ago, and it was approved officially. So now the city is an official sponsor of the event. And what that means, at least that what was in the resolution, is that we would be able to rent the Leach and Riverside, or the Leach Amphitheater under the city rate.
Right, basically, the city will provide the venue and the related insurance for that.
And insurance. So that was what was in the resolution. At our last meeting, we decided as a committee not to put in the funding as part of our recommendation, but I did bring it back to our committee after meeting with Michelle, and I think some of the concerns, and please clarify if I'm not, if I'm misunderstanding. So I think part of the concern was because we are partnering with NUCA, the Northeast Wisconsin Chinese Association, and we have an outside fiscal sponsor, Colorbold, that this committee had some reservations around committing the Unity and Community Fund into the event. Is that correct in my understanding?
Yes.
Okay. So something that Michelle and I and I guess what was not made clear was that the funds are intended to be put back and replenished, as a revolving fund for next year's event and the year after that. So that's one clarification that I wanted to provide. But then also, another point that Michelle and I had made was perhaps that Unity and Community Fund can be used kind of like on the city side of things, like what, so if we were to need city services, that fund in particular could be used for the event, but not go through our fiscal sponsor, because there would, be a 10% that would go into our fiscal sponsor, and so that money can kind of remain in the city for city purposes. So I wanted to bring that back up to our committee, and see if that is something that our committee would approve, and if so, then I could then bring it back to council to approve our recommendation. So I think for today, we only need a recommendation, or do we need to actually vote on it, Michelle?
Well, I think we should talk about it, right? And one of the things that Angie and I spoke about that we thought might be helpful is, again, the city remaining in control of those funds, and if this committee recommends certain things, to council that we should spend that money on, whether that's, again, services provided by the city, whether it's T-shirts for volunteers, whether it's, whatever, maybe that would give more confidence. If this committee knew what the money would be spent on before committing to recommending to council to spend that money. Because I feel as though that was some of the hesitation, and that's a little bit what Angie and I spoke about was, those funds were gathered by donations for the Unity and Community 3 or 4 years ago, right before COVID hit and the Unity and Community event got canceled because of COVID. So, you know, making sure, I think everyone wanted to make sure that those funds would be utilized in a similar manner and kind of see what we would spend those on before making a recommendation. Is that, I mean, I see some nods, but I don't mean to monopolize the conversation either.
So are we talking about like, we need a budget, line item budget on how to spend these funds, right?
Yeah, I was thinking that if you guys were able to see, like, what are they recommending? What is the team recommending? You know, basically, what does that budget look like? What would we recommend to council we spend that money on? That's what I thought I heard from this group last month, which is what Angie and I spoke about when we got together prepping for the meeting.
And we don't need to decide tonight what that would go towards exactly, right?
I kind of feel as though the committee wants to know what it would go towards before they make a recommendation to council.
Well,
But if
and I
I'm,
would just throw out that council, certain persons will probably want to know similarly. I mean, you're gonna be in that same conversation
Right.
in some regards. I would just say this, the two things that I recall raising, I believe, were, not knowing how it's gonna be structured, granted this fence, vendor fees, again, helping to ensure that as many possible vendors, those that are more, that's their profession versus somebody just trying to get their foot in the door and get started, like putting it towards perhaps vendor fees, scholarships, some way to augment costs if there is a need. And then, also similarly for the Dragon Boat teams, I have no concept of what the cost is. I'm assuming that's all part of how, you know, event money's raised to sustain this is through that. And again, are there ways to issue a sponsorship or a grant or some way to support, whether it's a youth group, you know, of certain ages, or some organizational, you know, to support. Those were the things I can remember coming up with, like vendor fees, especially for you know, maybe some under-resourced persons, or to somehow reduce the overall cost. I don't really know, and or equally the Dragon Boats, and that might be more important, but I'm not certain. But I think those are the two things I recall raising as
Sure.
alternative uses or purposes.
So I think those are great ideas. And based on some of our other funding, so like one grant that we're applying for in particular, is gonna cover like the vendor portion of things. So like it goes towards like ethnic and diverse businesses. So, you know, we're applying for specific grants that cover specific aspects of the festival. You know, I think if we wanted to sponsor Dragon Boat teams, you know, like you said, youth teams or a city team, the DEI city team, I think that'd be a great use. You know, I think part of the intention with the Dragon Boat competition is to promote and inspire connectedness, belonging, teamwork. So I think that would align with our mission. And I would be open to hearing other suggestions on what that fund can go towards. I mean, logistically, we'll need porta potties and, you know, we'll need, you know, a lot of, like, we'll need electrical cords and tents and things like that. So
And EMTs,
EMTs.
Oh, yes.
really, because any sports activity, particularly on the water.
Right. And so there are a lot of different ways that this money can be spent, but, you know, I would love to hear feedback on what this, you know, if our committee is going to move forward with that recommendation, you know, I would want it to be a committee decision.
I have a question. So would the leftover funds only be for the Dragon Boat Festival, or would we be able to use it for other things? Because I was thinking for part of the education aspect of our committee, we could put some of that money into being at the farmer's market, perhaps just giving out information, trying to connect with community members. I don't know what specifically we'd spend it on, but I feel like that could be an option.
I was kind of wondering the same thing.
Yeah.
Again, just like, I mean, especially when you start looking at these kind of these subcommittees and things like that we're looking at. Can the funding be applied to any of those, like any activities related to those pieces, or again, is it just all tied to the dragon boat race event?
Well, and maybe this will help answer, I don't know. However, that money, the funds that we're speaking of specifically are funds from the Unity and Community event that took place. And so I think the most logical would be to use it towards a multicultural event.
Right.
It does not have to be the Dragon Boat races.
Okay.
Or the festival. I know that, maybe in another year, we're going to want to add another multicultural event. I don't know. And so, again, I think one thing I want to clarify is that we do want to replenish that fund. So I think it's around $4,800. We'd want to have, that replenished for other multicultural events. But to your question, Juliana and Alex, I think we do have that $30,000 that's dedicated to DEI that we could bring back to discuss and make recommendations for its use if we wanted community input or focus groups or whatever it is. And so that might be, that might make more sense as to tap into those resources. Does that make sense, Michelle? Or does that, to you?
Well, yes, keep in mind the 30,000 includes all DEI efforts, including our employee training initiatives and such.
Right.
So it's not particularly all up for grabs, if that makes sense.
Right.
But definitely if there are things that make sense for the community, the council definitely wants us to utilize that funding.
Do you have a budget such that this is how much it will cost for the leech for security for each dragon boat team to be entered? Is that known?
Yeah, do you have a little profit and loss statement yet? Is that what you're saying,
no,
kind of? Costs and,
Right.
costs and incomes?
If a dragon boat team costs $10,000, we couldn't sponsor a dragon boat team. If each one costs $1,000, we can sponsor 4 of them. So I think that's why we don't know what 4,800 could go to.
Right.
Yeah, I think it depends on how far we are on the budget and the planning, because if we do have leftover things we need to pay for, then I feel like we could use the leftover funds. Otherwise, right now, I'm not really sure what we could put it towards because we're not sure on the budget yet.
Yeah. So if you, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, is this something we could also open up kind of like based on the survey, like when we were kind of trying to set up these committees or whatever, because I know we basically have the 6 of us here, and I feel like it'd be kind of difficult for all, for us to make decisions, for the whole group there, kind of again, some like ranking of, importance and things like that based on where we think the money could go. I mean, just so we get more feedback from other members of the board.
Well, this money can only go towards an event.
Oh,
We don't have a choice.
I thought we were just saying that it could potentially go towards like towards some of these activities.
No, the 4,800 is supposed
Oh,
to
the
be
four-
spent
yeah.
on an actual event.
Okay. So,
I got a question on that one as well.
Okay.
Okay, so this leftover money, is it controlled by council? Are we not, is it easily accessible? Or do we have to have a budget line item like I was asking, and then present to council like this is what we are proposing, and then they can say yes or no, right?
To be honest, I'm not sure because when this was first brought, when at the very beginning when we were talking about a multicultural event, Mark mentioned the $4,800 in Unity and Community, so I thought it was approved, but it seems to be that we have to get that approval from council.
Access
No.
it.
But
No, I think that's
council will
where-
need a recommendation from the
Yeah.
committee.
Yeah, I think with our recommendation to council, then it will be more important to go with the budget item. Like, okay, let's say we need
Right.
$30,000, but we only have $5,000 here. you know, because if we're just asking for that money, they may not give it to us
Right.
without that budget.
So I will be submitting a budget to council, because that is something that did come up at the meeting. You know, just, I'm looking up our finance, our budget sheet. Let me, so just to give you like a rough idea, we're budgeting that this whole festival is going to cost around $100,000. $40,000 will go to the Dragon Boat Company. They bring in the dragon boats, they have steers, they come the week before, and they do a lot of the logistical elements. The rest of the $60,000 goes towards marketing, you know, stage setup, photography, you know, videography. Let me see if I can find. And so what we can do is, as a committee, make a recommendation of like if we want it spent a specific way. I love the idea of, you know, sponsoring 5 teams. The cost of a dragon boat race or for a team will be between $800 and $1,200, depending on which organization that you're participating with. And we did that intentionally for, let's say, like a nonprofit, to reduce barriers for certain groups to participate. But still, I think even with that range of costs, there might be teams who would want to participate that aren't able to. So that, you know, that could easily sponsor 5 teams. And so I think that would be a great way to spend. But I'm, again, open to hearing what our committee, you know, wants as far as what that will go towards.
I think that's a great idea, just because this event is a multicultural event and we want to make the community come together and, you know, really spend some time together. And using that money, I think, would be very valuable to those that can't afford.
That financial barrier.
Right.
Would we, as this entity, and I should note, I'm probably on the committee now as well. I'm not exactly sure what my role is, but Angie and I just started talking about my working on it. So speaking from the DEI committee, would we trust that, would we want to put parameters on what sort of teams we would sponsor, or can we leave that up to the committee so that they could come up with what sort of teams they would sponsor? Do we want to say it has to be a diverse group, it has to be non-whites, it has to be what? I personally am happy
There
with
is all
leaving
the
that to the
sticky
committee.
points there, yeah.
Right.
I would not
Right.
have any interest in that personally. I
Right.
think if we
Neither.
were to make a recommendation that this is what we would like the money to be used towards, if I'm thinking, say you only have, there needs to be a process there, and I don't know how that would work, you could figure that out. Let's say there's only 3 teams that say they could use some support, you know, from neighborhood groups or something, like, okay, then there's funds that are left over. I don't know how prescriptive we need to be for council, but I think it would make sense to direct it, you know, towards this. It's unifying people, it's helping to bring different parts of the community possibly to the event and
Right.
participate. But the rest of it, I don't want to be micromanaging any of it. Just,
And frankly, we don't have the time to like wait a month
well,
to
and this
decide
is,
those things. Like,
well, that's the other part that's quite honestly coming to mind, so.
September, right?
Right, so like, I know this isn't holding up any planning, so that's good to know, but yeah, I think I would be for making a recommendation to using those funds to support.
Support this.
I don't know how you want to word it, if it's sponsoring or somehow if there's a way to offset the cost, I don't know what the appropriate term is, but that would make the most sense to me.
yeah. I mean, initially, when I went in with the request, it was like, well, we need some marketing, like, we need to create some brand identity around this and, needed some like marketing materials. For example, tomorrow we'll be we have a table at Toward One conference, which there'll be 600 participants. And so we'll have a table at the exhibit area. We needed marketing materials, just printing off a banner and 300, copies of a brochure cost, close to $400. And so we needed like some seed money, which is, what I made the initial request with. And so, if you want something more itemized, we can, but that might, we're planning this without consideration of the $4,800. We're not, but I think our recommendation of it toward the festival would be a positive one.
Right.
And so, I like something as simple as like, we're gonna sponsor teams, 5 teams. And, that will generate participation, hopefully. And so, if the, committee approves, I would be okay with that.
Do we need a formal motion for a recommendation?
Yes.
Okay,
I think Angie and I should not make the recommendation.
correct.
All you. It's all you.
Well, I'll make a recommendation that we move forward to let council know we would support and recommend they use the money to sponsor dragon boat teams, and leave it up to your advice.
However many it would
However many
support.
it is,
Right.
it's an undefined number, because you don't know what the need is ultimately.
Right, so motion to recommend the Unity and Community
Unity
funds be utilized for Dragon Boat team sponsorship.
Okay.
I'll
Awesome.
listen to that later so I can write it down.
It could even be called the Unity and Community Grant.
Sponsor,
towards the
yeah.
Sponsorship for the
Love that.
teams, and that might help.
So,
People had given the original money towards that.
I love
And
that.
that's really what my personal hang-up is with any of it is, I wasn't involved in raising the money.
Yeah.
I didn't donate the money. I really don't know what the intent was. Running past events, yeah, it's a money, you use it for whatever the needs are. But I don't know really what that was all about. So it just makes me feel like, I don't know.
We have a recommendation, or we have a.
Sorry.
motion.
Yes.
Motion,
Thank you.
yes.
I'll second it.
Michelle, should I abstain from the vote?
I guess that's really your decision. I can't tell you what to do. So you just have to decide what is best for you. If you do want to abstain, generally they answer present to abstain rather than a yay or a nay.
Would we still need majority, though? Like, among the,
The
so,
majority of those voting, so if you.
okay,
vote
of
present,
those voting. So if I abstain, it won't
like in
affect.
Congress, if people decline to
Mm-hmm.
the vote, it can still pass without them.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Adrian, you want to call the roll?
Lee,
So I'll abstain. Present.
Sabula,
Yes.
Johnson,
Present.
Hesse,
Yay.
Fischler,
Yay.
Nayeg,
Yay.
The motion carries. Thank you all. All right. Next on our agenda item, DEI plan action items discussion. So you have in front of you those who have.
So what we did to try to simplify the information was just kind of, did everybody's top couple, rather than being, I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We have all that, but, to try to see, were there any natural, I guess, areas? And it looks to me as though it would be very easy to, assign someone everyone to their number one, and potentially, number one and potentially number two area if they were interested. We did have a couple areas where the highest interest was their number 3 or 4. As you will see, those two areas we have listed as the people who, said that would be their 3rd or 4th choice. Which is why we did it this way, knowing that otherwise it might not be somebody's top interest. So, again, just trying to kind of outline where everybody's top interests were. We can certainly go into more details if you guys would like to.
Were these the only people that responded to the survey? Okay,
Yes,
I
we
just wanted
had
to double check.
eight responses. So we are missing a couple of members. So,
So from here, we can create smaller groups.
right, if we want to discuss, is it just a group of 2? Is it a group of 3? What does that look like to work on it and then come back to the larger group like? So, I mean, we don't want to make somebody particularly do 3 or 4 groups. I think we have enough where if everybody participated in 2 to 3, that would be plenty, without getting too complicated.
Are we kind of just trying to say which ones we would be most interested in now, or kind of?
Well, I mean, obviously, you already voted for which
Yeah.
ones you were
Or I
most
mean, like-
interested in.
Yeah, but yeah, like you said, like there's like the 3 or 4 there, or whatever. I mean, and if and since it was a lot higher up on other people's priority list, like I guess I wasn't sure how we.
Yeah, and really the way I looked at this, it was the next step to decide, well, how are we gonna start to put some substance to the framework that the
Right.
council had approved? So I think this is great. Thanks for running the survey. It helps to kind of, figure out where people sit.
If you didn't respond to the survey, can you do it right now? I have my numbers
Well,
here.
if it's resend it and
Yes, we're
things get
happy to add
lost.
you in.
Cool.
Right.
I guess personally, I mean, for myself, I mean, I guess I have my number 1 as community outreach, but then I have a number 3 as community barriers and health. I mean, I think I'd be interested in maybe those 2. I mean, I did have a number 2 down there in community engagement, but there's a few other people that it was their number 1 and number 2.
So you'd be
So-
happy with,
I would ask that maybe we resend the survey just to ensure that everybody gets it, because there may be reasons it gets lost, things forget, you see it once, you forget, whatever, and there's other
Right.
folks that might be gone. There might be some new people coming on, there's no idea, but I would just say if you could resend it and it'd be number 1 through 3 for all of us, just so then we can just sort of self-organize and we know who to hit up, right, and to start to pull things together, that would be helpful.
yeah, absolutely. I
doing
didn't,
that,
didn't
yeah.
want to delay,
No,
wanted
no,
to get
this
back
is-
what
this
we
is
had.
great. Yeah, because now I know who to reach out to.
Right, and absolutely, we definitely want everyone to be involved in whatever they want to. So, all right, well, it was a good start, and we'll remind everyone. Do we want to resend out a new one, or do we just want to remind those who haven't participated, I guess? Because Ashley, you kind
I
of
think
implied.
That would be it, just re-elevate it, just resend what's been, we don't have to reconduct it, but just, I don't know how it was set up, if it was a one-time thing, I don't know, have to recreate it, or, I don't know what's behind it all, so.
Yeah, no, I think,
Resend with
I mean,
a
I think
reminder, or
technically if you responded twice, it would let you. We don't
Right,
have it
I'm
set
not
up
interested
where.
in responding
Is it a
again,
Google
just-
Doc or like a Google
It
Forms?
was a, like a monkey, Survey Monkey.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sometimes that might just be-
I think if you just how did you send it out? Like an email? You can just resend that email, the same email out.
All right, we'll resend the email.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Some people's spam, I guess.
Yeah, anything's
happen.
possible. So, all right, whoops.
Well, then, do we want, with that in mind, I would just encourage all of us, I know we're busy, but it's really on us to then facilitate our own sort of engagements here. But I would, let's try to get some recommendations pulled out of this to council, so that we can like maybe start having discussions each time that we come back, just try to move things and ideas ahead. I know folks are looking for some activity. We have a framework. Let's just see what can be done. And I'll also just remind us all collectively, and it's all from my own head too, we were charged at one point or another, like facts, figures, rationale, like what's the problem we're trying to solve, and what are we expecting council to approve? Is it a financial recommendation? Is it action? But just thinking in mind, there's going to be people having to respond to it, so try to be a little more, I don't know, include some rationale, some facts, figures, where it makes sense. Doesn't
Right.
always make
Well, like you
sense.
said, what problem are we trying to solve? That's always a
Yeah.
good place to start.
Just general, thoughts as we move ahead.
So, clarifying question for the group, under community barriers, health, housing, economic mobility, are we planning on doing that through a survey, through community members? Like, is this more like super hyper localized, like what community barriers people are facing, or just general, like what are barriers to, to housing? We know that, there's a shortage of.
It would be up to whoever
All of that.
signed up for it, because otherwise we'll spend every meeting just talking about what we might be doing, so that whoever ends up on that will pick some topics to focus on.
Right.
Some topics
I'm
and
asking more
some
about the,
data, like-
go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, no, that was all I was gonna say. I was just adding on to that.
I'm asking more about our process, if we're planning on doing surveys or just what's out there currently. Because I think if you were to Google something like this, like you'd get article after article after article. So we know that there are like general barriers to health, housing, economic mobilities. I'm just asking if the group wants to hyper-localize it by just surveying, the community, or if we just want those general barriers, because I think that's already information that's out there.
I think it would make sense to localize.
Right, but I guess it sounds to me, Angie, like you're saying the group doing housing is gonna come up with a survey. Whereas I'm saying the group doing housing is gonna figure out what they're doing about housing. It might not be a survey. They might be interested in doing something with the housing authority that's already going on, and that's what they bring back to the committee. Or it
Right.
might be about, let's see where people live in the city. Are there white neighborhoods, black neighborhoods? Are there poor neighborhoods, rich neighborhoods? That's what whoever's working on that group would determine what they will look at.
Yeah, maybe it's surveys, or maybe it's some of the data that we already have, or data that we already.
Right, there's
Yeah.
survey results out there, like the county's recent survey and things like that. We just did a housing survey
Right.
for the city, so maybe that group, and I'm just saying maybe, looks at that housing survey and tries to look at what within this can we influence, rather than, yeah.
If we need additional data, then we could move to surveys, other things like that. But anyway, it's kind of hard to say until we.
Or they might say,
Kind of-
we'll do a presentation for the group on what we've learned about housing in Oshkosh, but they get to decide so that it's something different for every group depending on what they see as the needs.
Yeah, I'm just trying to simplify it because I think the information's already out there, and I'm just trying to reduce additional work for our group by saying I think the information's out there. Other groups have conducted surveys and studies, and there are best practices and recommendations, that are out there.
And if any
That's
of the
all.
groups
That's
are
it.
struggling for resources, I mean, I'm your liaison. So if you need me to reach out to other organizations or get you in touch with other city staff, to participate, I mean, I can do that. That's what I'm here for.
I would suggest looking towards the university to see what kind of projects that they're doing, because there's constantly research projects that are going on. I was just part of this one research project where we were looking at the transit equity with the Go Transit bus system. And we have yet to publish our findings and whatnot, but that is definitely a resource that would be really helpful for the things that we are trying to, I guess, accomplish.
And for example, Heidi being here reminds me that the Winnebago County Health is conducting a survey,
Right.
writing a, a community health assessment. And so, again, my point was the information is out there already, just to reduce extra burden for our group, was my intention.
If it's definitely there, then yeah, it makes sense. I mean, but just if we ever needed like further clarification, or if we wanted to dive in even more specifically into something that we had found, maybe statistics and the numbers that were provided by Heidi or the Department of Health or whatever, then maybe it would be appropriate to, send out additional surveys, try to get additional information, deeper dive if we have to. But again, obviously if the information's there, then.
Well, this is a good lesson in civics, in our city government, and really what are those roles and functions? There are rules, there are regulations, there are ordinances, there are things that can be adjusted that are gonna have impacts on this, and like, for me personally, that's where my mind is going, like, okay, so yes, we might need to understand more of certain practices and, so yeah, I don't know, it's good, thank you for doing this. I would love to see the number threes, just again, from my own mind.
Sure, and we can certainly
and
add those
that's-
in. I
yep.
just didn't want to put
Yep.
all seven.
Of
and
course, I
it
appreciate
would-
you filtering it, and then,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm excited. It's good, it's good work.
Wonderful. So we'll put the survey out one more time, we'll resend it, and then we'll gather up all the way through the threes, and then I think that'll help people kind of decide where they want to go. Again, we're not trying to overburden people by asking them to do 3 or 4 of these. I think, if everyone wants to do 1 or 2, I think we can get real far.
Okay, thank you. All right, roundtable time. So DEI-related activities and events. We have a local business spotlight that we'll start with. So Michelle, do you want to take that away?
Yeah, Scott has just a little visual that we can put up, but one of our DEI members recommended that we spotlight the Oshkosh Mediterranean Food Market. So just a little bit about them, that they have been a local grocery store here in Oshkosh since May of 2017. So this May, they'll be in business for 6 years. The Oshkosh Mediterranean Food Market was established through a partnership between Zana. Did you get pronunciations? Okay. Zana Hemen and Cardo Hadi, and I apologize if I misspoke on their pronunciations. It's a unique grocery store specializing in Middle Eastern food and Mediterranean food. They are actually the only grocery store in the Fox Valley that sells that type of food. This is what they're telling us, so I will. Many of their foods are organic with unique flavors. They also sell fresh bread with no chemicals daily. Serving the local Middle Eastern and Mediterranean community is what led the owners to open this one-of-a-kind grocery store. And of course, you can visit that at the Oshkosh Mediterranean Food Market on 914 East Murdoch Ave. Monday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. are their hours. So they were very excited about being highlighted. Just a reminder to everybody in the group, if you have a local business that you'd like us to highlight and share the uniqueness of that organization and what they can bring to our Oshkosh, our city of Oshkosh, we definitely are open to any recommendations. And then Adrian and I have been reaching out directly to those businesses to ask them if they are good with us doing a little spotlight on them.
Also, something that we're incorporating into our meetings, monthly meetings, is to acknowledge any awareness months or heritage months. So, when Michelle and I first started like Googling what Heritage Month is this month, or like what celebration is April, there are a list of, I don't know, like 50 different celebrations.
Right. There were so many and many deserving ones.
Sure. And so we chose that we felt were most relevant to our committee was acknowledging National Autism Awareness Month and National Arab American Heritage Month, which was part of the reason we chose the Oshkosh Mediterranean Food Market to spotlight. I think Scott has a short video.
He does.
Okay.
For National Autism Awareness Month, and then I'll talk a little bit about National Arab American Heritage Month after that.
There will be people who move on without you, and people you admire that you can no longer look up to. And there will also be gaps in the trees where the wind blows through and reminds you, no matter the betrayal or the rejection, there is still room in this life to make meaningful new connections. And there's also still room to breathe, letting your heart soften into release, finding that no matter what is changing, you are still free to pursue peace. For there will be storm clouds hovering over the flower fields where you were hoping to watch the setting sun. And there will be cities you meant to visit before the world as you knew it came undone. And there will also be moments when you remember the small strip of ocean shore where the sea foam sang to you that morning, "There is more, there is more." And in the end, you will find, even when you are carrying so much on your shoulders, you were not just getting older. You were not just surviving. You were a living, breathing soul, slowly redefining what it meant to be thriving. And one day at a time, you are finding the courage to keep traveling through. People move on, everything changes, and through it all, you change too. You've had your fears, you've had your losses, and you've had to face the raw reality of grief. And you've also dared to have this hope. Every day, you are still becoming who you were meant to be.
All right, and Angie, do you want to just mention briefly the person who wrote that?
Yes. So Morgan Harper Nichols is a poet and an artist, and she also identifies as someone on the autism spectrum. And so we just wanted to highlight her as her poetry and just the beauty and as a good reminder for us too.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think, we had for Women's History Month last month, we had several poems, and so this just kind of fell right into that pattern a little bit of this person, so. And then, unfortunately, I was unable to arrange someone to talk a little bit more about National Arab American Heritage Month. I just did want to mention, though, that this was just first recognized this year by President Biden as National Arab American Heritage Month. So it is something that is, I guess, official for 2023 by President Biden's historic proclamation. So again, just another step forward that we wanted to acknowledge. And again, there were so many other months we could recognize. Unfortunately, we can't recognize them all every month, but want to take a little time to do this, so.
Any other related activities or events in the area that anyone would like to share?
So last month, on April 15th, we had a real Oshkosh family gathering. That's the racial equity advocacy and leadership in Oshkosh. We held it at Boys and Girls. We had almost like 100 plus people attend the gathering. Good food. Ashley was there. Yeah, it was awesome. So we're gonna have another one maybe next month. But our meetings are monthly, so we'd like to urge those people who are interested in coming to these meetings, as we post them on the calendars, please come in and share and gather with people. That's how we get to know each other. Yeah, another thing that I have here is there's going to be a leadership summit in Green Bay. That's coming up on May 9th, 2023, from 8 in the morning to 6:30 in the evening. The organizers for this summit are the Madison 365, the state's leading source for local community news by and about Wisconsin's communities of color. So some of the panels or some of the topics that will be discussed there includes barriers to healthcare, Black, Indigenous, Asian and Latino communities, and also retooling DEI. So always first and only in navigating the isolation of exhaustion of being the only one in the predominantly white spaces. It's going to be a very transformative place to be. So for those who are interested, I think this could be a good place to be on that particular day.
Where was that?
It's going to be in Green Bay. Yeah. I'm planning to attend it. Yeah.
Any others that anyone wants to speak on?
Yeah, so on campus tomorrow morning, there's going to be a co-sponsored talk by the Intertribal Student Coalition, and it is going to be about reconnecting individuals with the earth and acknowledging the abundance of natural resources available to us, as well as utilizing indigenous culture for addressing the climate crisis.
Interesting.
What time?
Tomorrow morning, 9:40 to 11:10 in Sage, 1216. So that'll be the first floor in one of the big lecture halls.
Michelle, myself, I think Adrian and Courtney are all attending the Toward One
not
conference.
Adrian.
No.
Courtney is
Okay.
attending the Toward One, and we have someone from our police department, someone from our community development department, and someone I forget another department also attending the Toward One conference tomorrow and the next day in Appleton.
See you there.
Yes, we certainly will.
Looking forward to sharing about it next month. Okay. Any other events? Remember, you can always share those events with me or Michelle
Yep.
to be shared out.
Yep, and get them, we will get them also out on our Facebook page if we know
Yes.
about them, so, and I don't know if any of you have been paying too much attention, but I think Courtney's been doing a great job of getting a lot of events out on our diversity, equity, and inclusion page. A lot of times I'll see something that I'll send her to post, and she'll be like, yeah, I posted that yesterday.
Yeah,
Okay.
awesome. Something else I'd like to recommend is I just invited, all my friends to like the page, and that helps spread some of the, or publish it. Okay, moving on to outstanding items, update on Chief Oshkosh statue.
Yeah, so we have all of the, I think they call them proofs. We have all of the plaques, and they are working on the actual celebration details of how those are going to be, we'll call it launched. But I'm expecting to hear more very, very soon when, a date is picked, and the, I guess, the wishes of the Menominee are known, as to what they'd like that celebration to look like. Because of course we want to respect their need for when they have that launch. Do they want something private? But of course, then after the celebration, it will be open to the public. And so I should have word very soon as to when that is going to happen.
Thank you. Update on community event. In the last month, I've been just partnering or finding more people who are interested in supporting and partnering for the Dragon Boat races. Most recently spoke with Jeff Schneider at the Oshkosh YMCA, and they were one of the main planners when the Dragon Boat races were here in town. And he's supportive of the event and also offering consultation and support. I've been speaking with different sponsors and getting more progress on our global markets and our affinity fair, and just thinking about some of those logistics. Yeah, and met with our city event coordinator, Kathy Snell, and ironed out some other details, logistics, spoke with someone from the U.S. Coast Guard, or I'm sorry, the Coast Guard Auxiliary on some of those, a safety plan. So a lot of moving parts right now. Yeah.
All right, future items on council agenda. So some future agenda items that actually says there's a TIF presentation at the Scarlet Hotel Group or the Best Western on May 9th. And if I could remember what TIF stands for off the top of my head.
Tax
The
improvement. What? What are the Fs?
financing?
Tax increment. Oh.
Yeah, I forget. There will be.
Incremental financing.
There will be the review of the mayor and council salaries. We do that every other year. Again, future agenda item, not tomorrow. We will have a housing workshop for infrastructure and subdivision codes, June 27th. There's a CIP budget workshop on June 28th. And it does look like council member announcements and statements tomorrow night, the report of council liaison for boards and commissions. So it looks like that's on the agenda for tomorrow night. It's just the report. It's not voting, but the actual report looks to be which I believe is recommendations on the agenda tomorrow night. So.
When will we get our new council representative? Because Aaron is off the board.
Yeah, so Matt Mugarauer will need to work with the new council members to determine who would be our new liaison. Their first meeting with the new council members was last week, so I'm sure it's going to take a little bit. Technically, the switches for liaisons is normally like June 1st. Could we get assigned somebody more quickly? It's possible, but I'm not quite sure. They, I don't know if you know, but they will be appointing a 7th council member tomorrow night as well, to take Matt Mugarauer's council position since he was elected mayor. So there's still some moving parts. But I'm sure Matt, as the new mayor, will be working with the council members pretty darn quickly to assign that. I think he does want to get this 7th one in place as well before he makes, works with the council members to decide who's going to be liaisons to what committees.
Yep.
Other questions?
And a member of our DEI committee has applied for a council seat, Lakeisha.
Yeah,
And, just,
anyway, but yes, there are quite a few applicants.
yes, there's.
Tomorrow night. If anybody is interested, feel free to tune in. So.
All right. Any future agenda items? So just a reminder that if you'd like to participate in the focus group for the community health assessment, reach out to Heidi. You can always email me or Michelle any future agenda items. and, yeah, and other events that you know of.
Right, so obviously we'll discuss our DEI plan groups again next month. I'll put that on as one thing.
When is our May meeting?
Not Memorial Day, the week
Right.
before that. It ends up being the 22nd-ish, I'm gonna say.
Yes.
The fourth Monday, not the last Monday, just to remind everybody. Fourth Monday, not the last Monday.
If our meeting is before the long celebration, I can't remember the name of it, they could be a good group to do
Focus group?
to do a presentation.
Spotlight.
Yes.
Yes. Yes, great idea, as it's also Asian American Pacific Islander Month. Mhm. Great
I
idea.
think theirs is Memorial Day weekend, but.
I believe you're right.
And I know that Mi Yang has offered for us to host a table if we're interested. And so if anyone is interested in doing that, you can reach out to me, Yang, or me. Yeah, for myself.
Me.
Okay.
So the question when it comes to like our focuses on like our spotlights and stuff like that, is it strictly, are we sticking strictly like to businesses, or I was wondering like artist spotlights, things like that in the community? I guess I wasn't sure if that would be something separate, or again, if it'd be something anyone would be interested in, but I don't know, I was kind of curious about that.
Yeah, artists are,
They really haven't
Part of the creative
defined it to a box, we'll call
Okay, I
it,
wasn't sure if it
so.
was just, I wasn't sure if it was just
Right.
community businesses or anything, or kind of other things as well.
I feel like anything pertaining to DEI would be appropriate.
Right. Welcoming, inclusive, belonging, all of those wonderful things.
all right. If no other agenda items, questions, then can we get a motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any objections? All right, meeting adjourned. Thank you.